Cool. That sounds good.
It takes a second to do it. It worked.
So we're live on TV right now. If someone has YouTube Live, they're watching us.
It could. It's working.
Awesome.
So
how's it? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's thank you for joining us. It's 4:30. We have 23 participants on. We're going to give it another minute or two and then get started.
Yeah, cool. How is it out there in New York today? I wish so bad I could be out there in person.
Where I am, it's humid and it feels like it's going to rain.
Really?
Yeah, but
muggy.
Muggy.
Oh, okay.
I haven't had the air conditioner on in a while, but I turned it on today.
Okay. Oh man, take that. Here, I turn on the heat in the morning on my drive to work. Already. Well, I'm still doing the air on the ride home. It's still a little warm in the afternoon, but in the morning
that's funny.
It's chilly already. So I'm excited to come and visit New York here soon. I'm really looking forward to trying to get out there. So
Syracuse.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be able to make it to the conference out there in person. I wish I lived there, then be a easier task. And so one of the first things I'm gonna get is a New York style pizza, because I know how much everyone I talk to is like, you gotta get a New York style pizza. And so
then you get into what part of New York?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, don't get the pizza people started.
Oh, I will. There's an icebreaker about pizza, because New York. I'm a foodie. I know some of you have dinner coming up in about an hour, so get you hungry. So I'll pause because I'm sitting here excited and ready to go.
All right, so let's get started. I'm gonna start talking on it to make sure I get the right screen. Oops, wrong screen. I'll get the right screen. All right, welcome to our first webinar of the season of the school year. It's strategies for school counselors to create a more inclusive environment with our friend Derek Francis. This is, I think, the third Derek Francis webinar we've had in New York. And those of you who don't know Derek, currently serves as manager of counseling services for Minneapolis Public Schools, experienced cross-cultural counselor, educator, and trainer who is passionate about creating ASCA-based counseling and support strategies for schools, organizations, and individuals. Specializes in supporting students, parents, and staff after major racial incidents, increasing academic achievement for students from underrepresented backgrounds, and strategies for closing the achievement gap and graduation rates. If you have questions or comments, put them in the chat box and we'll pass them on. And as a commercial announcement, this is our professional development committee. Dr. Gail Reed Barnett is our chair. I'm not sure if she's made it on yet. Cynthia Wally is our past president, is on it. Kathy Corbett's on it. I'm on it. Laura Mesa, our membership chair, is on it, as well as Cheryl Hall. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Derek and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for being here. It means a lot that you're here, that you want to connect and grow on your journey with supporting students. And so I'm so appreciative that you're here to learn and grow together today. So I want to make sure that you all see this as a time of connecting. And that's the key part of this, is making sure we're finding ways to connect and grow. So let me pull up my screen. And I like to get to know you all, because I think it's so important that we're finding ways to build relationships. And I always want to be intentional about helping us to pick up some strategies, things that you can do to support students. So a lot of the stuff that we do today, you can utilize in growing in connections with your students, with the staff in your school. We're going to talk a lot about creating inclusive spaces. And that's going to be finding commonality and finding opportunities to learn about someone else's identity and experiences. And so the first activity we're going to do is a pizza-themed icebreaker. If you don't like pizza, I apologize. You got to bear with me. But from what I hear, y'all love pizza out there in New York. When people say New York, you think about the pizza, the big slices, and I love pizza. And so, and I know it's dinner time soon for somebody. So let's think about pizza. So we're going to do a little icebreaker. The first question is, what is your favorite place for pizza in New York? And I'm talking about anywhere, not just in New York City. You could be in upstate New York. You could be in Syracuse, Utica, Long Island, Rochester. Where's your favorite place to get pizza? And I utilize the chat and type it in there where your favorite place is. I hope to get out to New York here soon. And so I can't wait to have some of these places be where I check out. So there's a Mama's Pizza in Copiague, New York. I would have to find where I got something to write it down with too. Tino's, okay. I know I will be checking out Brooklyn area, so I need to be mindful of what pizza spots are in Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn. The last time I was in New York, I was in Brooklyn, and I loved it. Absolutely loved Brooklyn. So cool. And so I see folks are sharing their places, and you know the thing about pizza is I love pizza, and I love ordering pizza with people, but we always come down to the fact that we love pizza. There's still times where we have our preferences of things that we like or maybe don't like. So maybe for some of y'all in New York, you have this dilemma when you order pizza. So I'm going to just talk through just some maybe pizza toppings and share what you feel, and keep the suggestions of places coming in the chat. So if you're ordering a pizza and it's coming out, how do you like your pizza? Do you like it cut into triangles or squares? So we're looking at preferences. How do you like your pizza? We're having a pizza icebreaker. I personally am a triangle person. Sometimes it depends. If it's a thicker crust, I want that triangle, because then you can dunk the crust into something, whether it's like a garlic dipping sauce or ranch. But I like the triangles. Thinner crust pizza, I like in squares. Okay, triangle, I eat it like a taco. Yes, I've done that. I like that. I love all the greasiness too. I don't dab the paper towel to get the juices out. I want all that. I let it pool in there. Upside down pizza, then a square. I've never heard of upside down pizza. Okay. That must be a New York thing, upside down pizza. Next thing on here. How do you like your crust? Thin crust, deep dish, or hand toss? I only ask this because this is what they ask you at Pizza Hut. How do you like your pizza? I think someone was going to share. Go ahead if you do. I like more of a hand toss. I like that in between where it's a little crunchy and soft, but not too thick, because those deep dish pizzas are, oh my goodness, sometimes there's so much bread, but I like a good hand toss pizza. I know I said Pizza Hut. You guys don't do Pizza Hut out there in New York. Pizza Hut is a thing here, especially Book It. Oh my goodness. Anyone remember having Book It growing up? Oh my goodness, that was the place to go. You got your little free pizza thing. Let's see what else we got. Here's where really see, upstate New York has Pizza Hut. What's your least favorite pizza topping? You know, that one topping where people are like, hey, you can put whatever you want on it, but please do not put this on it. And it's always someone who's like, oh, okay, can you put this on it? For me, it's whenever someone wants to put anchovies on pizza or mushrooms. And I'll say, what? And then it gets into that, like, what? You don't like that on there? It's like, no, I don't like that on there. It's those are the one or two things where I'm like, please don't put that on there. I see some people, Samantha said olives. I love onions. I don't know. I love onions. Let's see, what else? Christina says she eats any kind of pizza. Yeah, anchovies that's a tough one for me. I'm shocked when people say they want anchovies. But I can't hate. Hey, if you like anchovies, that's what's up. The last one is, what's your favorite pizza topping? When people ask you, hey, what do you want on your pizza? What do you usually say? Hey, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For me, it's always sausage or pepperoni. Always, always sausage or pepperoni. Buffalo chicken. I usually don't think buffalo chicken. But I get it though. A good buffalo chicken pizza is good too. Mushroom and sausage. Janice, we'd have to share. You'd have to do half of mushroom and sausage. I honestly love sausage and pepperoni, but mushrooms would be challenging. Cool. I'm so thankful for you guys participating in the Icebreaker and sharing ideas for places to go when I finally get out there. Think of ways you can use ideas and icebreakers and get to know use like this with your students. Building the relationship is so key. I don't know y'all from nowhere except for the fact that we're counselors, but we've built a rapport on commonalities of things we like and things that and found out there might be some things we dislike, but I think we built a way to get to know each other a little bit better. And so those are some of the things I hope you can pick up from our time today and utilize it with your students and colleagues. I'll introduce myself. I'm Derek Francis. I'm the manager of counseling services for Minneapolis Public Schools. And I've been a school counselor. This is going into my 10th year. I started off as a school counselor at North High. And during that time, North was about to shut down. 75% of the enrollment had left the school, and they were thinking about closing the school. And then within 4 years, we had a new staff that came in, and we ended up having the highest graduation rate in our district. And so that's something that I am really excited about in my work. And I've also worked in schools as a school counselor at Champlain Park, where we address multiple major racial incidents. And so a lot of my background's in leading school counselors and doing the work to get to know students from different backgrounds and address their unconscious or even conscious biases so that we can close the gap. So that's what I do this work from. I have a 2-year-old daughter. That's her. Her name is Grace. You're going to be hearing about her in a little bit because I'll just share about how the past couple of years have been with doing this work and how it's driven me to want to do this from my heart even more. Here's our goals for today. Get comfortable, relax, put your feet up. I know some of y'all it's dinner time because y'all an hour ahead of us if you eat an early dinner. So go heat up your food, heat up your pizza, get comfy, get something to write with, have your computer ready. We're going to be interacting. This isn't sitting yet, so I really hope you came ready to engage. And we're going to learn a deeper understanding of ourselves, learning more about your identity so that you can build a closer cross-cultural and inclusive environment. Next, we're going to learn strategies to help students learn about their identity and about others in their class. And then we're going to talk a little bit about cultural humility, how to have it, how to use that skill so that you can learn about other people. And then we're going to wrap up with learning how to give and receive critical feedback. So that's our plan for today. I asked, as we're here together today, there's going to be times where we're discussing, having dialogue, where you're going to be in small groups, where you're going to be sharing about your identity or about maybe experiences growing up. I ask that you stay engaged, I know sometimes we can be places where our mind is there, or our body is there, and our mind is somewhere else. Especially if you're in front of a computer, you could be online shopping right now. If you are, I'm a large in shirts, I'm a 32 in waist, 36 in length, and honestly, blues look good on me, I hear. So I just play with you. But if you are online shopping or your mind somewhere else, I really hope that you're able to. What was that?
Not happening, Derek.
You're right. But I figure I might as well let them know in case they're looking. I'm kidding with y'all, but it's so important that you're here, not just physically, but you're here mentally. because this conversation is so strong and important for the growth of our country. And having these conversations, there's times where there's discomfort, where you're like, I don't know what to say in that moment, or I do remember saying something hurtful growing up. We ask that you speak your truth and accept non-closure. We're not going to answer all the problems in the world today, but our goal is continuous growth. See this as a space to learn. If this is your first time having conversations around understanding race, inclusion, identity, I'm glad that you're here. Also, again, being vulnerable with yourself, speaking your truth. And then I really encourage you to be proactive. Do something different because of your time here, because of this hour and a half together. I think it's so important as we settle in, we think about the past 2 years. I think, especially when you're diving into conversations around race, racism, discrimination, identity, hate, bias. And so just looking at our country again to center us, we've navigated a pandemic and that we're still in. And what that pandemic brought on, the increase of discrimination towards Asian American people. So just seeing how things socially, how it impacts our identity. So if you're Asian American, having to hear me as a school counselor, hearing from students that are Asian American, times where they're experiencing discrimination because of their racial identity. Being mindful that in the midst of the pandemic, we saw multiple unarmed Black people get killed in our country. So then that triggering of feeling like, goodness, what is going on? Someone who looks like me, and I'm here in Minneapolis, my own city, having that impact your identity, how you navigate your society, your community, your school. We saw the 2020 election and noticed the divide in our country around so many different topics. Then we had the January 6th insurrection, then the verdict of Derek Chauvin, and then Juneteenth. And now many schools are coming back to in-person and the dilemma of mask and no mask. And how do we talk about these topics of race and things that have happened in our country? And so we find ourselves where there's a divide again around how do you have this conversation around talking about race, inclusion, in our country's history. So I'm going to share a brief video that'll bring us up to speed around how some of these dialogues may be going in your very own school and your community, and then we'll see what ASCA has to say about it. Oh.
Is a way of thinking and teaching about a.
Make sure you got the volume up. So again, setting the stage for understanding where we are as a country of having conversations around race, inclusion, and the concept of critical race theory. Then we'll hear what ASCA has to say about it.
America's past and present by looking at the role of systemic racism, what we've just been discussing. But the very term itself, critical race theory, has become a political flashpoint across the country, especially when it comes to how to teach young people about justice and equity in America. As Amna Nawaz reports for our Race Matters series, the debate over its potential role in school curricula has set off a firestorm that has roiled school districts and state legislatures nationwide.
It's already over. It's got to be over.
Next year, Jamison Maddox will be a senior here in Loudoun County, Virginia. His favorite subject is history, even though he felt Black history was lacking.
I think there could be some things that happened in history that should have been taught.
In school, did you learn about the Tulsa Massacre?
No.
Did you learn about Juneteenth?
No.
Do you feel like those are things that should be taught as part of your formal education?
Definitely.
Jamison's mother, Vanessa, agrees.
This is American history. All of it should be taught in a certain context and also age appropriate.
Maddox, who works as a job recruiter, and her husband raised both their sons in this affluent Northern Virginia suburb over the last 2 decades. Last year, as the national racial reckoning resonated here, Vanessa joined a Facebook group pushing what they see as anti-racism efforts in school.
When I saw the anti-racist parent group, I'm like, okay, I got to be in that.
What spurred you to join that group in the first place? What has that been like?
There is a definite need for a group like this. I like to be surrounded by like-minded, fair-minded, equitable people. You don't have to think like me, you don't have to be like me, but you do have to be anti-racist.
Not everyone in Loudoun County sees it that way.
There were parents that were just sick of it. They were just sick of, constantly being told, if you don't agree with me, then, you're a racist.
Ian Pryor's two daughters are in elementary school here. He's a former Trump administration Justice Department spokesman, now leading a group called Fight for Schools, a political action committee pushing back on equity and inclusion measures.
We're not about not teaching history. We're about teaching history in an objective way that is not represented as America is systemically racist.
When you're looking not at individual acts of racism, but the systemic racism that exists within America's educational institutions, what would you suggest be done right now?
So there's a balancing act here of making sure that there's equal opportunity for all, that we're committed to meritocracy, but also that when we are trying to figure out how to deal with any kind of social problems, we do not overstep and overreact.
There's two signs right there.
Parents who agree with Pryor are now part of a growing chorus opposing what's known as critical race theory, or CRT, often a graduate-level framework that examines how the legacy of slavery and segregation in America is embedded in legal systems and policies. The thing is, critical race theory isn't being taught here, but that didn't stop dozens of parents from flooding a recent school board meeting to protest it.
The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
I will do everything I possibly can to fight to the bitter end until you prove to me that you are not teaching my children that they are racist just because they're white.
That outrage echoes messaging ricocheting across right-wing media.
Critical race theory is racist.
I don't see critical theory, race theory, in our Declaration of Independence.
Much of this can be traced back to a September 2020 directive by then-President Trump, instructing agencies to identify and halt funding of anti-bias training for federal employees that suggests, quote, the United States is an inherently racist or evil country. On his first day in office, President Biden used an executive order to revoke the Trump administration's action.
When I hear the talk of critical race theory, I immediately get a signal. It's an alarming system for me because it's a misrepresentation and misuse of the word.
Jalea Lyles-Dunn is the Director of Learning for Justice, which offers resources for teachers to create anti-bias learning experiences.
Culturally relevant, anti-racist instruction models needed. We need a classroom set up, so not just instruction, but we also need a space that lets children know you are welcome here. Inclusive education is a space where we all are at the table together. We all hear everyone's story.
The debate over which stories are included and how they're taught has fueled pushback. Critical race theory is now being leveraged as a catch-all phrase by opponents of equity and inclusion efforts in public education.
All right, I want to pause and for those who may just be joining, to give you a summary of just understanding in our country right now when deciding to have conversations about inclusion and diversity in schools, it may be met with pushback. One of the things around pushback is the topic of critical race theory. And so that video shared how people are feeling on both sides of the conversation. And so what I want to do now is share what ASCA has put out around having the understanding of critical race theory. And so it's so important that we're aware because we're working to make sure we're supporting all students, and ASCA is one of the ways that we can stay grounded in doing this equity work. And being mindful to take a read at ASCA and the statement that's brought out. It shared what critical race theory is, and it shares that in the discussion piece that systemic racism, oppression, and white privileges are real. And it shares about how our country is navigating these topics. And then it shares for us here our role as school counselors. what it is that we're supposed to do, being mindful of the mindsets for success. And so it's important that we're being aware of our work as collaborators with our education and community stakeholders to create this systemic change. I want to also share a few messaging from ASCA around the use of anti-racism content. Again, this is to ground us if we're doing this work, to know that we have the framework in case there's pushback. You can always leverage knowing, hey, our association does support us in doing this work. And so coming here and seeing the different ways that you can utilize ASCA resources and having some dialogue that can be challenging at times. I'm not sure where you are in your state or the way conversations are going in the area, but I would imagine that there's times where some people find it challenging to have these conversations. And so this is a way for you to utilize the resources that the association has put together. I see that I got really excited on sharing all that information. What I want to do is also remind you and ground us in the history of our profession. School counseling as a whole has a lot of work to do with reckoning with our history and how we've addressed helping students develop their identity. And so I'm going to share a brief clip of Dr. Cheryl Holcomb-McCoy sharing a little bit about school counseling history and how we as school counselors can begin to take up the role of being anti-racist school counselors.
Because I believe that we can't have this conversation without this acknowledgement of the history from whence we come. So our history in school counseling is steeped and centered on whiteness. And I think we all can agree to that. It started as vocational guidance and psychology without a racial context. The purpose of modern day school counseling started with the passing of the National Defense Education Act, NDEA, in 1958. We sometimes remember that as being the Sputnik Act, in which the federal government wanted to improve secondary school counseling with the emphasis on high school counselors creating pathways for students, white students, primarily white students, to enter into the sciences. It was a federal initiative to increase our ability to land a man, not a woman, not a Black man, not a Black woman, or brown woman or man on the moon. And later the field turned to education initiatives such as High Schools That Work and the School Development Program that were also student-centered, but centered in whiteness and developed to increase the academic achievement and post-secondary school preparedness, not for Black and brown children, but primarily within the context of whiteness. Also during this time, graduate counselor education programs were becoming more grounded in clinical and community health models that were also written by white men. And they viewed school counseling as highly skilled mental health counselors with or without an educational context. They were being placed in schools without that education context. So I'm saying this all to say that our professional history is not grounded in an anti-racist framework. It has never been. And the field has not historically pushed back on racist policies and practices. Yet school counselors are often the implementers of these policies, from determining who is in gifted and talented programs, determining who has certain labels, the problem student, the emotionally disturbed, that defiant student. These labels often stem from the work of school counselors. And that's not to say that school counselors believe that, but school counselors are surely a part of these processes and these policies. So school counselors, in my mind, are on the front line of providing opportunities for students. We have a very powerful
And so I shared that information to give you a sense of grounding, of understanding our profession, our profession's history, and also an idea of where our profession as school counselors is asking us to go. And so I want to also ground us in some understanding of why. Why is this work important? Why is it needed for us to help students understand their identity and combat racism and hate in schools. In 2019, a report came out, and the report's called Hate at School. The report was done by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and almost 2,800 educators were asked about how they were seeing hate and discrimination in schools. And so I want to give you a breakdown of that information, how it looked. And I want to start sharing now personal narrative, just to give you an idea of how this, let's break it down for how it feels, what students are hearing in school, how hate and bias is showing up. 33% of the incidents that were reported by these educators, they said was racial and ethnic identity related. So students at school are being discriminated against based on their racial or ethnic identity 33% of the time when incidents are reported. 25% are anti-LGBTQ. Again, we're talking about students' identity, how they are, who they are, how they're showing up at school, and they're experiencing hate. 18% anti-immigrant, 11% anti-Semitic, 6% anti-Muslim. And I think it's important to understand what it sounds like. Students are hearing, go back to your country. Students are being told, you're not American. I know I even heard students say, build the wall. These are things that students are hearing. It's impacting how they feel about themselves. We expect them to learn and feel comfortable in school, but it's hard when you're hearing these things about yourself, about your identity. And let's see the location of where it's happening. Inside classrooms, 32% of the time, percent of the reports were in classrooms. 37% of the reported incidents were in the hallway. I think it's so important that we're aware of the incidents and where they're happening in our schools. And again, knowing what hate incidents are, what it sounds like, what it falls under. So it could be the name calling, that's derogatory, verbal insults, those identity-based insults. It could be displays of discriminatory symbols. So I know even bathroom stalls or in buses, the different symbols that people use for hate. Or it could be excluding or isolating people based on their identity, not including them in certain activities or groups or mocking or cultural appropriation. So those are some examples of what it could look like. And now here are some examples of what you might see it show up. Maybe in a community near you or in your school. Your own building might have had an incident where racism has happened to students or staff to student or staff to staff. So here's some different reports that came out in the past, goodness, not even a year. Now we're talking again about identity. So a 13-year-old is being physically abused based on his identity of him as being gay. Asian American students are sharing that their identities are being attacked during the pandemic. And so I think it's so important for us to know that this impacts how students learn, how they show up at school, how they interact. And I want to be mindful that I've seen this happen. I've heard this from students as well. I've experienced as a school counselor working with students who have said, hey, there's been some racism going on in our school. Or I'll share briefly in 2017, as I was a school counselor at Champlain Park, we experienced major racial incidents in our school. We had a student who posted on her social media, and it was a post with the N-word, of her singing a song with the N-word. And it was one of those videos where, as a school counselor, knowing that we had students around the school see that video, it impacted them.
See the video.
And the students in our school not only were impacted, they were at a point where they said, we want to make sure that our school is doing something about it. We need to have this dialogue. And I want to make sure I'm centering student conversation and voices before we dive into how to do the work of talking about identity. And so this video, you're going to hear from students sharing about what it was like. And these are students that I worked with, and they shared about what it was like having a major racial incident happen in their school and what they wanted to see as a change. Listen, and let's start thinking about how we can hear the voices of students and incorporate it into our work as we learn some strategies coming up.
We're being handled. And so the students responded. Take a look at this video.
Last Friday, we were shown that racism still exists within Champlin Park.
Snap, don't clap.
Racism is ignorance. Racism is not only about consequences, but about education and justice. Today we are here to present how many people were impacted by this issue. Don't read only for the consequence of what might come out of it. That is not the only intention behind it. But use this opportunity to educate the ignorant. The people that don't know.
Yes.
The people that don't understand. This is our platform. Look how big of a platform we have. Look how much support we got within CP. Because we stand together. This is the rebel family right here. This is
All right, and for more information on that, that's a video series about addressing racism in school and how it's been impacting students here in Minnesota. I'll put the rest of that full video in the chat in case anyone wanted to check it out. It just talks about the climate of racism in schools in our country right now and what we can do to address it. So, and so as I share that video, I know many folks, unfortunately, may have had incidents like that at their school. I know in the previous videos that and trainings that we've done, I talked about how that impacts our school environment, the school dynamic, and provided strategies for how to navigate major racial incidents. So please, if you get a moment, if you have incidents happen in your school, even if you haven't, be proactive. And so this is this is a picture of my daughter. You're probably like, why is he showing a picture of his daughter? This is my ham. I love her. That's my girl. And over the past couple of years, with everything going on in our country, it really began to make me think. And as I've been working at elementary schools more, it made me think, how early did I begin having conversations about race with my own parents and about my identity? And I started thinking about with the students, how early is it to start having these conversations? And so I want us to think, because we work with kids, with students, with youth from an early age. And so elementary counselors in here, I think the work that you do in helping students develop in their identity is so paramount, so huge. And so to get us thinking around doing this work, we're gonna have our first poll come up. And that poll question is, think to yourself, how old were you when you had your first conversation about race, ethnicity, or identity? So the poll should be coming up. How old were you when you first had that conversation? How old were you? And then also, so we'll start there. How old were you? And as you're filling it out, I remember how old I was. I'll share. I was 4 years old, and there's a program called Head Start, and Head Start would pick you up from your house. Well, for me, I lived in an apartment complex, so I thought, hey, they pick us up from the house. And so for me, at Head Start, I remember having a bus driver. And my family, I'm half Liberian, and my dad's from New York. And so, but my family, I grew up until age 4. I didn't have any white teachers or staff or babysitters or caregivers. And so I remember the bus driver, my parents knew I was going to engage with people who were white. And they would give me these, even at 4, like, hey, make sure that, you make sure you say thank you, say please. And they would specifically say, hey, you're gonna be around students that are of different backgrounds, be kind to them. So that was I remember the bus driver though. It was my first time I was like, okay, this is my I'm engaging, you know, he's outside of doctors or visits. I remember the bus driver was the first one, Head Start. And so looking at the results here, I'm going to end the poll so we can take a look. It's telling, look at that. 27% of the responses say between the age of 5 to 10. So about a quarter of folks in here. And then 43% said that conversation was between age 11 and 15. And then you see folks say it's 16 to 20, 21 to 25 range. And I also want to be mindful that some folks might say, you know what, I never had this conversation. It never happened. We never did. And so I want to be mindful because some people in here never had that conversation, even till to this day, with their growing up or maybe with their family. And so this is a spot to grow and learn. If you haven't, maybe that's some dinner conversation today. And then we're going to do the second poll. Who did you have the conversation with? So go ahead and take a look. And again, that first poll, I hope you're able to see some of the trends of majority of folks having the conversation before the age before leaving high school, so before the age of 15. So that's something for us to keep in mind. Let's see if the next poll is up. If we could, there we go. Here's the next poll. Who are the top 2 people you had the conversation about race and identity with? I shared with you all. For me, it was my mom. I remember it like yesterday, because my mom's Liberian, and we would talk about just understand what Liberian culture was like, food, clothes. And so for me, it was definitely that messaging would come through early on my mom. And so I see folks are still sharing here. And again, if you've never had real conversation or dialogues about race, identity, people of different backgrounds, I really want us to get into a mindset of, all right, how can we start thinking about students that we work with, how much they might be noticing some of these identity pieces of each other. All right, so I see most folks have completed it. So I'm going to share the results. And so you see here, of the results, 48% of, so a good amount of people said parents, also friends, families. Some people said teachers. So I want us to be mindful of that as we're doing this work of considering the age where a lot of us had our first conversations about race and identity. Most of it was before we even graduated high school. And then also a lot of it, though, looked like it was had with parents or friends or family members. And so being mindful of the spaces where students are going and where we are at school, where they're having a lot of that interaction with people cross-culturally, how we can support those conversations. I want to now share with you all how important it is to be aware of all of our different backgrounds. I know some people in here maybe grew up not having a lot of conversations about race with their family. And so I want to be intentional that we're aware that some families, some people from different backgrounds, and I'll share about myself, the conversation about race and inclusion was one that we did have often, about getting to know someone else, but about how we show up, how my identity might be viewed. And so I want to share, and I know I've talked to friends who are, and the example you're going to see here in this video is of people who are Black, African American. But I know this video I'm going to share with you might end up being something where people from other ethnic or other identity backgrounds might say, yeah, I remember having talks like this similarly. And so the video is called The Talk. I'm going to pull it up now.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
It's an ugly, nasty word, and you are going to hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not going to let that word hurt you.
Is that your ID? Guess I stopped you. Now, when you get pulled over, I'm a good driver. Okay? Baby, don't worry. This is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home. I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
You are not pretty for a black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
So I want to pause because I share that video because I think it's important for us to know that that we have counselors in our country of various backgrounds. But we have some counselors who may not have grown up having conversations about race and identity and inclusion. And some students are showing up to our schools and they are in the mindset of, hey, having these conversations are things that I've been having at home. And so I think it's so important for us to see ourselves, to come alongside our students and their families, to have conversation about their identity, the struggles they have in their identity, and how to grow. And so an approach that I really look forward to sharing with you all is the multicultural education framework created by James Banks. There's a couple of key components for you all to check out on here. But some of the key things for understanding multicultural education is that it's providing students with an opportunity to use their educational environment to learn about others in their community, their culture, their beliefs, their values, especially as we as school counselors, we're preparing our students for an ever more diverse world. And it should be equally important that students are understanding how to connect with someone of a different background as it is growing those academic skills. We have students that are going to be starting college in a dorm with someone of a different background. And so it's so important to understand, how do you grow and connect with someone who has a different identity, especially in our country's time right now that tends to be divisive at times. And so the goal of multicultural education is combating bias and discrimination. And you'll see that in some of the activities we're about to do moving forward. The concepts integrated in learning content. And so that's creating content where you're learning about other people's identity and culture and finding similarities and building connection and curiosity. And also helping to find that sense of pride in our students and their identity. We have so many students now that are from different backgrounds and have multiple identities. And so it's so important for us to help them grow and develop in who they are. And so we're gonna, before we even dive into how we help students learn about their identity, I think it's so important for us as educators to know our own identity, our own social identities. And so we're gonna do an activity here where we, where we learn about and reflect on our own social identities. So your social identity is your sense of who you are, who a person is based on their group memberships. We have so many different group memberships of identity that we have, and we navigate and we interact with people based on the identities that we have, which ones hold certain levels of value, which ones are anchor identity. So our identity impacts how we navigate society, how we show up at school. My racial identity, my ethnic identity, my religious or spiritual identity, my age identity impacts how I'm received, how some people might be even experiencing me presenting this information. And so it's so important for us to be aware of how we show up in our identities and which ones we attribute more value to or see in, through which lens of, and also our students. And so what we're going to do is do a reflection of ourselves. And so I'm gonna, first of all, give you all in the chat the link so that you can make a copy of your own social identity wheel. And so, so that you can, as I'm sharing, you can go ahead and follow along with me. So let's see, let me add this in here. So it's in the chat. You can go ahead and it's gonna bring you to this here, social identity wheel. And what I want you to do is take a look. I want to make sure you explain it and give us time to do this dive. Is we're going to start off by looking at the different categories. So there's the different categories, and then there's the actual wheel. And so you should be able to go in here and download and make your own adjustments, or you can copy this side here and just have the list and then put your response in. So whatever you prefer, you can do for responding to it. I know some folks like to do it where you actually put in the wheel, or if you wanted to do it where you're just answering the questions on the side here, you can do it like that, whatever you prefer. And so I'll go ahead and pull up my social identity wheel so you see it as an example. But before I do that, I want to go through the different categories. And if anyone needs help, let me know. I want to slow down because we're going to do a dive about who you are, your identity. So first, when we talk about identity, there's multiple. We all have multiple identities. One is gender identity. And you see it there, it could be being, some examples are woman, man, transgender, non-binary. There's racial identity. I want to make sure I describe race and ethnicity because they're different. When we talk about racial identity, we're talking about the physical, the ways. And so this is, I know for some of you listening, like, okay, this is race and identity 101, which is good. That's how we grow. When we're talking about a student and their racial identity, it's more of those physical traits, how their skin tone, hair texture. So when we say race, that's specific physical traits. When we say ethnicity, that can mean a variety of nationality. It could mean more culture. It can mean more food. It can mean more regional when we talk about ethnicity. So an example I like to give, and I'll show you my wheel, is my race is Black, African American, but my ethnicity that I identify with is being Liberian. And so just understanding that not all, that there's a difference between race and ethnicity, and just understand that dynamic. Next, I want to go through some of these other terms, such as class. So there's working class, lower class, upper middle class, and then ability. So knowing the different identities and this is one I'm growing in humility around. And so understand the abilities can be and learning abilities. It could be physical ability. It could be abilities seen and unseen. And they can be temporary abilities or lack of ability. Then there's sexuality. And some other options there: lesbian, gay, bisexual, heterosexual, queer. Education, straightforward. Age. Some of y'all be real, say, put your age, middle age, young, that's to your own discretion. But then also there's language, nation of origin, and then I leave a spot for other, because some folks might say, hey, you missed out on saying I see my identity as a mom, or as a sister, as a brother, or as a carpenter, or as whatever identity we may have missed. We want you to be able to put in your own identity there. So go ahead and fill out your identity wheel. This activity is one that could be branched out for a variety of different activities, but we're going to just keep it at focusing on you, knowing more about your identity, because it's going to be important to know that as you start thinking about how you navigate school and support students. So take another minute to either use the wheel itself, or again, there's some folks who might say, I'm just going to copy paste and use and put in on the side there my information. You can do that. So whatever is easier for you. I'll give you another minute to finish your social identity wheel, and then we'll do our activity. And I will make sure to share this activity in case you're like, hey, I want to do this with my colleagues, or when we're done, I'm going to show you how to do this as a lesson with your students too. So just want to make sure I got you. It's not just here for us to do this activity. I want you to keep this dialogue moving forward so that you can have this conversation with students and their identities. take another 20 seconds and fill out your wheel or make your list about your identity, how you identify who you are. And I share some of mine here. My nation of origin here in the US, my sexual orientation, heterosexual. And this is a whole dilemma filling that one out for me. My racial identity is Black or African American, ethnic identity is Liberian, and you can see the rest here moving on. The necklace just break. All right, so what we're going to do now is, as you're wrapping up with your sharing about your identities, we're going to go ahead and do a little activity where you start thinking and exploring about your own identity, understanding who you are and which identities have how they hold meaning to you. Because as we're having this conversation, think about our students. They have identities too. They have cultural identity. They have so many different identities that we might not even see or know. And so, as we're doing this activity, you're going to be put into groups, and you're going to be in the groups for about 2 minutes. And in that time in the group, you're answering questions around your identity, just how it shows up for you. And I know some folks are like, oh my God, now we got to go in groups. If it's something where you do not want to participate, if you're like, hey, I'm digging this, but I don't really want to do all this engaging thing, I respect that. I know some people, it's like, it's hard for me to talk about my identity. And so I also want to encourage you and let you know that your students, they have identities that they want to grow and blossom in and want to learn more about. So this is an opportunity for you to try an activity where you can grow in some of the exploration. If you do decide to hopefully you come back if you do decide to leave, but I really hope you stay and do the activity. So we're gonna have you go into small groups here it'll be for 2 minutes and have each person share. The first one is, which social identity has the most meaning to you? What's your anchor identity? The one where you're like, this has the most meaning to me. And so if we could have folks into small groups now, maybe we could do groups. Oh, what was that?
Like two or three people?
Yeah, 2 or 3. Yep.
Okay.
And you're answering this question, which social identity has the most meaning to you?
Okay, here we
go. Here we go.
Options.
I hope I get to be in some of you's group. I look forward to being in someone's group.
2 minutes.
Cool. Let's do it. 2 minutes. Let's share it, and then we'll come back.
Bob, You don't have to assign me a group. I'm actually reading ASCA proposals.
Cool. During that time, you all had an opportunity to share about your identity. Which one's most important to you? Anyone want to share which one that? And the thing is for us, is thinking about which identity is like the one you're like, I think about this one the most. That's the one that feels most important to me. And so, anyone want to share which one they chose for that?
I don't mind sharing.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I chose education, and as I shared with Derek, just growing up in various neighborhoods and just seeing how much, the education varied, it was always something that resonated with me, and it brought, how important it is, especially as a young man of color, of just pursuing education and seeing that there was a lack of education in some of the communities that I grew up as well. So that was my 2 cents.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Stephen. Stephen said his is education. I see in the chat someone Liza shared. I hope it's either Liza or Lisa. I might get it wrong, but shared being a woman. Thank you for sharing. And I think as we're doing this activity, think about also your students. Which ones would some of your students have put as their first identity, the one that they see as the most important and closest to them? Think about some of your students from different backgrounds. And so we're gonna do another one here. And again, it's a chance for you to explore your identity and how you get to know about more of yourself. So what I'm gonna do is show my screen, and this next one is which identity do you think about the least? So think about looking at all your identities on your social identity wheel. Which of your identities do you think about the least? The one where you're like, I don't even think about that one, or I don't know, what is that identity? I don't know. Or let me ask mom. So take a minute, think about that for yourself, and here you go. Go into your groups. Hey, I see some friends making their way back. During that time, we were sharing. I'll wait. I see folks starting to come back. Thank you. And honestly, thank you, Mr. Rotunda. You double as as a leader for the state association. You double as IT. I mean, what don't you do? So thank you. I appreciate it. Seriously, I could tell, and he answered so many of my questions, y'all. I don't know how. And so I wanted to see if who would like to share which identity you think about the least. So thinking about all your different identities that you wrote down, and we all have more than we listed, but which one on that list do you think about the least? Feel free to use the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share too.
I think I don't really think so much about my abilities right now because like I've just finished school and like I'm still trying to explore and like figure out, like what I'm really like in this world to do, That makes sense.
Yeah, yes.
Hi, I would say that I think about my class the least, and this was really hard for me to take off. But I don't really have these conversations with the people around me about, okay, this is what your income status is, things like that. So I never think about that as, okay, this is who I am. But I feel like I should start because America, the world revolves around money, things like that. So I feel like it's important for me to actually begin to think about and maybe prioritize it more.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing even the awareness of other, whether it's other students you work with, other people in your circle, being aware of how social identity in finance is a huge topic for some people, but you were sharing it like, something I don't think about much at all. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else would like to share about which of their social identities they don't think about much at all? They think about the least. And I know when I did this, for me, it was language, what language I speak. I even just jumping on here, now I'm in thinking like, oh, is this going to be interpreted for people who speak a different language? I speak English and I walk into spaces and I don't even think about, oh, is there going to be someone to interpret for other people who don't speak English? And so as you're thinking about that question and your identities, I think these are just examples, and that activity can go deeper. And I'll share with you the way to utilize that, either in your team or with a small group. But I think it's so important that we take time to explore our identities, because sometimes the identity that you think about the least, not even on your mind, don't even think about, that could be the identity that some of your students or colleagues are like, that's the one I think about all the time, especially our students who may be marginalized. And I think it's also, and this is for another time, but getting into knowing that our identities have, some are visible. So some of the identities that we have and we have multiple identities. Some of them are the ones that we can see. So sometimes our students show up to school with identities that we can see, whether it's their body, their skin color, their physical traits, gender, physical abilities, behavior. And then some of their identities are those that you can't even see. You wouldn't even know. And those are identities. Sometimes I think it's so important for us to be mindful of what's not seen, how that's so important, the unseen, being aware of it takes getting to know a person, to build a relationship, to start learning about a lot of these unseen identities and diversity traits. And so I really think it's important for us as school counselors to know how to do that work, knowing that some identities are we're born with. And some identities are chosen, and that some change, and then also some are permanent. And then the other piece where we talk about the topic of privilege, and if we had more time, I would dive way deep into that, would know that some identities hold power and some identities are marginalized. And so it's so important that we're aware that as we're working with students and people of different backgrounds that have different identities that are important to them, and some that are not even on their radar. But regardless, some of our identities have power and we will not face discrimination and bias. And some of our identities, we know what it feels like, and we have experienced discrimination based on that identity. And I think it's so important to be aware of that and know that our students have this experience as well. And so please be mindful of doing this identity exploration. I'm getting so excited that I'm like, I don't want to run out of time. The other piece I want us to be mindful of, especially with doing cross-cultural identity development, is being mindful that some of our students and families have negative views of their identity, or they have unfulfilled potential views of their identity. So it's our role as school counselors to be aware of how we can break down, especially in the career domain, the job stereotypes of certain careers. What identities are seen as, oh, we don't do that job, or men don't do nursing or work in the hospital, or Black people don't do these kind of classes or career. I think it's so important for us doing career development to help students see a mirror of people who look like them in professions. Someone who they're like, oh, I see someone who looks like me that's a doctor or a lawyer, or that's a teacher, or that's doing this awesome career, not just the professional athlete. It's so important to also do exposure at an early age, helping kids as they're developing their identity for who they are, be able to be mindful of like, wow, I'm seeing a positive view of people who look like me at an early age. And our role as school counselors is to provide a path for post-secondary attainment for students to be able to say, hey, I'm going to not just share a few post-secondary options that are in the area, or that have a demographic of people who don't share your identity. I want you to find a post-secondary where you feel your identity is welcomed and accepted. So for me, that's been helping students who will say, hey, I went and checked out this school and I don't feel there's a strong community of LGBTQ students. Can you help me find a school that would be welcoming? And having that real dialogue for identity development and career development. We want our students to show up to school and feel like, oh, I can go to this college or this post-secondary or this field and feel supported in who I am. And so I want to share this video, and it's called The Hands, because I think it's so important when we're working with students that we're aware to help open up their eyes in all those different variety of ways that I just talked about. So I'm going to pull up this video and watch and listen to the different perceptions around how this youth can use his hands, and even the different mindsets and underlying messaging as you're watching this. And I share this video because we need to make sure we're looking at it from a career development standpoint, how important it is to talk about students' identity when doing career development.
Who said that?
Wrong video. I don't know if you can tell, I love Procter & Gamble. They do some awesome work with inclusive videos.
Nice. You did the two things we always talk about. What's that? You worked hard and you
Have fun.
have fun, my man.
It's a real star you got there.
Thanks.
Take care of those hands. I'm taking you places.
I got hands. I'm gonna go pro.
You definitely could.
Easy money.
Easy money. Have you ever thought about what else you could be? Go along, son.
You could be a brain surgeon. Your hands could operate as skillfully as Dr. Myron Rowe. Or a sports agent, handling big contracts like Rich Paul. What about an artist? You can be as creative as Brian Blue the Great. The art you make could inspire the world. Son, you can even be an astronaut, flying in space with Leland D. Melvin. Sure, with those hands, you could play for a team, but you could buy a team. Ownership gets to wear the rings first.
I can do all that, Dad?
You can be anything you want with these hands.
So that video, it screams career development to me, because it's so important for us to make sure that we're sharing with students, with youth at an early age, how they are able to lead and be strong youth and grow in their career development at an early age. I want to make sure that we think about how can we do that. And I know this showed example of a young African American boy, youth, and so I want to be mindful that not just identity development around race, but how can we make sure our LGBTQ students feel that they can see a mirror of someone in the profession and feel encouraged that you, in your identity as a gay student, that you can be in that career, that you do belong in whatever profession you want to be in. That's the kind of work that we really need to start doing as school counselors. Y'all getting me excited now. And so what I want to do in our time left is be mindful of, and I always want to remind us to, when we're doing this work, I want to share a few examples of how to use these resources and have conversations with students about identity. And so I'm going to share a few different ways to do that. But before we do that, I think it's so important that we're as educators, we got work we got to do. We have to be aware of our identity, but also the messaging around that we were told about people from different backgrounds and our own bias and how it shows up in school. So sometimes our bias shows up in the course selection process, in our belief in students and how well they can do in a certain class, or I think they'll maybe just be an athlete. They're tall, they're strong, they're good at basketball, but maybe not at higher level classes. Or we don't, that's stuff on us as counselors we got to work on. Data review, who is going into those higher level classes? Which students are we being mindful of who are experiencing harmful discrimination based on their identity? Remember, we talked earlier about certain groups, how they have been experiencing hate and bias in school. How are we being mindful of that? How are you being mindful of your discipline at your school? Who's looking at the data? Who's being disciplined at a higher rate? And then your staff representation. How are we setting up that mirror where students are seeing someone who looks like them from an angle of, wow, I remember for me, the first time I saw a school counselor, a Black male school counselor, I was 26. I was in grad school for a profession. I'd never seen someone who looked like me do. But I had seen a lot of people playing basketball, and that's what I felt my identity was in, was being a good If you ever see me in person, I'm 6'4", I say 6'5" sometimes, because I don't know for sure. But you see me, you're like, dang, I do hoops or something. And growing up, that was the identity I would always have. Oh, I'm a good basketball player. But I love school. I love getting to know people. And so I think it's so important we help kids see the true potential of their full identity. Before we go into our next activity, I want to pull up our last poll. And our last poll is, how long have you been in education in whatever capacity that you're in? How long have you been in the game? Because I know some people, you're just starting off. I know there's some students in here. If you're a student, what's up? Welcome. Glad you're here. Welcome to an amazing profession. I've been a school counselor for 10 years. It's the best. I love it. I have a feeling I'll be doing this the rest of my life in some capacity. I know we got some people who've been doing this for years, some OGs in the game of education, and I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for your work. And so take a look there as it's coming up. It's going to be kind of cool to see the people who respond. think we got a couple more people. We'll leave it open for another second or two. It's been open for a while. Let's see, 67% folks did it. Let's see where we at. So, look at that. We have 6 people who are in their first 5 years. Welcome to the profession. We have some people who are in year 6 to 10. I'm right there with you. I'm year 10. And then I see we have some people that are, what's it, the next one? 17% are year 21 to 25. Wow. We got some real veterans in this space too. And then I wanna give a shout out. There's somebody in here. You know who you are. If you want to give a shout out to yourself, please do. You've been in education for 36 years plus. Who in the world could that be? I want to say what's up to you. Can we say hi to you? Because you have some knowledge and would be amazing to recognize. Anyone who's been in education over 35 years? No, you don't want to share? That's okay. I get it. Don't want to out yourself. I just want to tell you, whoever you are, thank you for your work in education. I think it's awesome. I always want to make sure that I acknowledge that I'm only in year 10 and that I know there's people in here who've been doing this work for years. And so I want to acknowledge that. And one thing I want to also acknowledge too is growth. One of the things that we want to do as educators, regardless of how long you've been in education, is grow, do something different. We're not experts. And I know us as educators, sometimes if we've been doing it for a while, we're like, I know what I'm doing. I've done this a million times. But I want to make sure as you go and move forward in leading content around race and identity, that you see it through the cultural humility lens. Again, when I say cultural humility, that means you're leading this work from the mindset that it's an ongoing process. We're always growing. We've never arrived. And it's not based in the knowledge and training and number of accomplishments or number of what title you hold or how many years you've been doing the work. It's not based in your competence. It's based in your humility to be able to say, you know what, I'm always growing and learning. I have something I can do better at. I can ask the question of, where am I getting it wrong? I didn't know it was happening like that. So I want to make sure that we do this work moving forward with humility. And for time's sake, I'm going to hustle to the activities. And I want to share with you all some activities here in the last couple of minutes that we're starting here in Minneapolis. And our goal in Minneapolis is to create content where we're able to help students grow in their racial identity and learn about people in their community, and also learn about careers and seeing people from different backgrounds in their careers. We want students to learn about cross-cultural connections with the students that are sitting right beside them. And so we're doing that through, and I'll share with you the resource around it and how to utilize it, but it's called MPS Neighborhood. And it's going to be content that we've created to help students learn about other people and their culture. And so I'm going to share, and each one comes with and I want to make sure I highlight deliver, because I think it's so important as school counselors, we think about how we can deliver this kind of content. And so I think about how to infuse identity lessons in your classroom or in small group when you go into your lessons. In Minneapolis, we require that every 9th grader does a identity exploration. And so I want to make sure I share with you all what the elementary version of that looks like. I'm pretty sure I had that in here somewhere, but I'll make sure to share it out with you all so that if you would like to try some of these activities out with students, you can go ahead and give it a try. And so that you can have a chance to say, hey, I want to try doing this activity with my students. Oh, my mouse is, where's my mouse? There it is. Okay. So what I want to do is share with you, so I'll share with you the MPS neighborhood first. There we go. So I'll share with you, what I'm going to share with you is first the worksheet that goes with it. Again, this is an opportunity, and this is one way we're sharing with students how to learn about someone else's identity and culture and land acknowledgement. And so with the clip you're going to see, is a part of MPS, the racial justice work we've done. And so one of the things in our city is one of the most prominent lakes in Minneapolis has had its name changed from Lake Calhoun to Bde-Maka-Ska. And it's to honor the Dakota land that the lake is on. And many students don't know how to say the new word, the new lake name, Bde-Maka-Ska, or even know why did the name change. So we saw this as an opportunity to align our ASCA standards and also use our opportunity to teach students about other students and their identity. So I'm going to share a few of the way that we're doing that. And then that way you can think about how maybe you can do that with your own students. I might have a commercial.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help.
Let me pause and get the commercial out of the
I just wanted for our visual friends to show the name. This is as it'll appear on signs. How did I do? How do we pronounce this new name?
You had perfect pronunciation.
Do it out of your own.
All right. Bde-Maka-Ska.
Okay. And what's this broken down word for word? What does this mean?
Bde means lake. Maka means earth. And Ska is white, and it's named after the white sandy beaches on the lake.
Sure. And what does this mean to Dakota people and to the community more broadly to have this change? I mean, I know it's something that you've advocated for a long time for.
Oh, yes. It means a lot because if we go back to the original name, then we're acknowledging that Dakota people have lived here for centuries. And to use that, then when we go to the lake, we'll be seeing our name for the lake, and it'll say, okay, Dakota people are welcome here.
So I want to pause there because that's one example of how we are supporting students. And this lesson handout and this activity will be available for you all to see as an example or even utilize with your students and staff so that you can help students start thinking about, hey, how can I learn about someone else's culture, someone else's identity in a way where you're learning, you're exploring, you're writing it down, you're dialoguing. The other video in here that I want to share with you is we had students who wanted to share about how racism in our city, here in Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities, how race discrimination and racial justice look to them. So I think another thing in sharing identity is making sure students are able to share their voices. So listen and watch how students are incorporated in sharing about their identity and how they want to stand up for justice. Justice learning sessions that included anti-racist strategies, dare to be real small group discussions, and how to combat anti-Asian hate. The second half of the day was spent gathering and then walking as a school to the George Floyd Memorial Site. Let's take a listen at this awesome learning opportunity. Listen to what experiences that the students and staff had.
So we came down to the George Floyd Square today because we had this little thought in our head, like we should do a racial justice day. So our racial justice day at our school is great to see, like us breaking chains, us coming out marching, us changing the world, and trying to make it better because we're the revolution. Us young people is the revolution. So in order for us to be heard, we have to show why we out here.
I feel like what's happening around the world affects me because I'm a black man in America. So I had to come out here and show love and support because it can happen to me any day.
I'm a school counselor at Roosevelt High School. I'm so happy and proud to be here with my RHS community.
Today was Racial Justice Day at Roosevelt.
Every little bit counts, like speaking, advocating for yourself.
It all starts with us. There is change. You know, we went so long with no justice, nothing at all. But then with George Floyd, we kept fighting, and we saw change. So they say that we're the future. We don't feel like we're the future. We're like, how can we do it? Like, we only can do so much, but we really are.
All right, and so I share that to show an example of how And I'll make sure these videos and the resources are available to you all. But it's a way for you to begin to engage students in conversation around identity and race and inclusion. And I know when we did this racial justice work, students were of all different backgrounds were engaging, talking, having dialogue around what racism looked like and felt like and how to combat it and how to speak up. And the dialogue between students of different backgrounds was so rich. And I think that's our role as school counselors, that we're helping them have that skill before they move on to post-secondary. And so I want to recap and allow time for us to just recap for today. We talked a lot about social identity, understand the importance of our identity and how we navigate, but also about race and multicultural education. How do we educate students about learning about other people's identity? And then proactive lessons you saw here around how to do the work. And you have this resource, it'll be available. You can use it, you can pick it up and say, hey, how can I calendar this into my school year, into my unit, into maybe next month? Because I think that's how we can be more proactive. So as you're thinking, I want first of all say thank you for being here. Thank you for taking your afternoon to want to learn and grow on this journey. And I wanted to see what is one thing you want to work on today, moving forward. One thing, if you want to share either in the chat, one thing that you're going to take away and work on, or either a resource you might utilize moving forward, or one part of today where you were able to take something that you might use in your work moving forward. So I'll pause and see if anyone wants to share something in the chat or unmute themselves and share, and I'll be here just to engage and hear feedback.
Derek, good afternoon, school counselors. Before you guys comment or speak to Derek, I just want to thank each and every one of you for participating. As you can see, I'm in the car. My husband's driving me home, and I have about 10% battery left. So I didn't want to tune out, and well, what happened to her? I'm Dr. Gail Reed Barnett, the Professional Development Chair for the New York State School Counselors Association, the best association in the world. Derek, thank you so much for your wisdom, your knowledge. We love you, and
love y'all too. Thank you for the support y'all provide. I appreciate it.
I want to say hello to my colleague, Ms. Richmond. Put a face with a name. Yes, we were speaking last week. Glad to see you. And so many other counselors that are on here. Bob, you're going to have to finish up if you don't mind.
Okay.
And hope to see everybody at our conference in November. Be safe, be well, be happy.
Cool.
Does anyone want to share? Okay.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It was great overall. And thank you to all the school councils for participating. I'm so glad to be a part of NISCA.
Thank you, Stephen. So thank you again, Derek, for joining us on this, whatever day it is, Thursday afternoon from New York. And just as a heads up, we just scheduled this today, October 18th, New York State Graduation Requirements Workshop. And we're going to have another series of Champ Camps called Champ Camp Express this year. Stay tuned for more information. Thank you for attending. We will be sending out tomorrow a certificate of attendance, a link to the recording, as well as an evaluation. And Derek's going to give me materials that I can get to y'all as well. So, any questions? So we're going to sign off for today. Have a great evening and have some pizza.
Yeah. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Derek. That was really, really great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming.